It was supposed to be a routine exploration, sunken wrecks off the Atlantic coast. A hobby for some, a job for others, and for a few, an obsession. The water was calm that morning, the kind of stillness that makes you think nothing bad could ever happen. But deep below, where the sun doesn't reach, something ancient and angry waited. I never heard back from the diver. Not on that trip. Not ever. Let me take you back, though not in order, because some parts are clearer than others. That's the thing with sea stories. They drift, like pieces of a shipwreck scattered across the ocean floor. You gather what you can and hope it adds up to something. The first time I heard about the Clarabelle, it was late, 1:30 a.m., maybe closer to 2. I was watching old deep-sea dive footage from the 80s, digitized from VHS. Grainy, blue-green shadows. Then suddenly, the divers went silent. Their camera panned slowly across the broken hull of a merchant ship. Nothing unusual, until one diver's breathing picked up and his light froze on a small, rusted bell swinging gently in current. It shouldn't have moved. The water was still. Then came a whisper, barely audible over the static. A woman's voice. One of the divers gasped, dropped the camera, and everything went black. That tape was never aired. It was pulled from the archives. I only got my hands on it because a retired TV producer mailed me a copy anonymously. What got me wasn't the whisper. It was the sound after, like someone dragging something heavy across metal. A scraping that didn't belong down there. Years later, I met someone who claimed to be the last surviving crew member of a recovery team that had gone to retrieve bodies from Clarabelle. He was in his 70s, eyes sunk into his face like he hadn't slept in decades. He agreed to meet at a cafe near the docks. He ordered black coffee. No cream, no sugar. Then he stared at the table for a while before speaking. They wanted us to find bones, he said. We found handprints on the inside of a sealed steel bulkhead. From the inside. I didn't know what to say, so I asked the dumbest question possible. Were they human? He looked up at me like he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They were too small to be adult, and too long to be a child's. Fast forward to 2022. A diver in Indonesia live-streamed a descent to a recently discovered World War II Japanese vessel. Midway through the dive, the signal cut out. The screen went black. Then, without warning, the feed resumed, showing the diver frozen in place, mask fogged up from the inside, his regulator still in place but not breathing. The strange part? He floated there for 6 full minutes before the camera dropped the floor and the stream ended. People thought it was a stunt, viral marketing for a horror movie. But I looked at the metadata. The dive was real. And worse, the final coordinates of the stream matched those of the Fukushima Maru, a hospital ship that sank with hundreds of wounded soldiers aboard. According to the diver's friends, he didn't believe in ghosts. He does now if he's still alive. Here's the worst part, and I wish I were making this up. Some divers say that certain wrecks follow you home. They don't mean literally, like a ghost on your back or anything out of a movie. No, they mean the sounds follow you. The wet footsteps in your hallway. The soft clanging of a bell when you're trying to sleep. The salty dampness that appears on your windowsill, even though you live hundreds of miles from the ocean. One man claimed he moved 3 times across the country after diving near the wreck of a cruise liner that sank mysteriously in the 1960s. Each time, he'd wake up drenched in cold water, his clothes and sheets soaked. He even stopped showering, afraid that even a few drops of water might invite something back. He finally disappeared in 2018. No one knows where he went. His apartment was left untouched, aside from a flooded bathroom and a note that simply read, "I told you they don't stay down there. If you think the ocean is beautiful, you're right. But beauty doesn't mean safety. And not everything that drowns stays gone. Some ships sank with secrets. Some wrecks were never meant to be found. But curious minds go down there anyway. Some for treasure, some for history, some for answers. The ones who come back don't always speak about what they saw. But sometimes they don't come back at all. The worst dive I ever went on was in 2019. Not because anything physically went wrong, but because of what I brought back with me. The wreck wasn't famous. In fact, it didn't have a name. Just coordinates passed between divers online, called drop site echo. No official records. No military logs. Just sonar hits, rust, and rumors. The ship was split in half, the bow buried in sand and the stern resting eerily on its side, like it turned back to look at something in frozen fear. The moment we got within 30 meters of the wreck, my dive partner's camera started glitching. Not a big deal. We assumed interference or damage. But then his oxygen reading started fluctuating, up and down, like something was tugging at the gauge. He thought it was a faulty sensor. I didn't. There were carvings inside the metal walls. Not just rust lines, deliberate carvings. Rows of tiny circles, scratched over and over again. Some were symbols I didn't recognize. Some looked like faces. One looked like mine. That was the last dive I ever took without protection gear, beyond standard kit. When we surfaced, we said nothing. Not even on the boat. Not in the van. Not until we reached the dock. He looked at me and said, "Do you still hear the knocking?" I did. It wasn't waves. It was rhythmic, slow, hollow, like something was trapped below, still banging for help. If you made it this far into the video, I want to say this. Thank you. These stories are real to the people who experience them. Whether you believe or not, these accounts are consistent, chilling, and spreading. And if you're as fascinated and disturbed by them as I am, make sure to subscribe to the channel right now. We post new horror stories and strange true tales every single week. True encounters, unsolved mysteries, things whispered but never confirmed. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and join us as we go deeper into the dark corners of what the world wants us to forget. Because these stories don't go away. And if you've heard something strange in your house lately, it might not be your imagination. Some ships never make the news, like the Edmondson. No accident report, no obituary. It just never reached port. In 1974, a local fisherman off the coast of Newfoundland reported seeing the vessel at dawn. It was drifting completely silent. No SOS, no flares. He pulled up alongside and boarded with two others. What they found made all three men leave their gear behind and leap into the ocean just to get away. They said the decks were soaked, but it hadn't rained. Every clock on the ship was stopped at exactly 2:47 a.m. The lights flickered, though the power was clearly off. And below deck was something they never spoke about. Only one of them was willing to describe it. He said the air felt thick, like the ocean itself had come inside. His ears rang, his vision blurred. And then in the dark, he heard voices whispering names. Names he didn't recognize, but one was his daughter's. She was 6. She died of unexplained respiratory failure 2 months later. He never went near water again. In another case, a former Navy diver, anonymous for legal reasons, submitted a written account of a classified recovery op in 1987. According to the report, they were dispatched to retrieve sensitive equipment from a sunken surveillance sub. He swears at 200 feet below, inside the narrow metal tubes of the hull, he passed a chamber with water damage, but the walls were lined with scratch marks, some deep, some wide, as if made by claws. On his way back out, the lights cut off, his backup lamp flickered, and that's when he saw it, a face in the glass, watching him from the inside of the bulkhead. It didn't move. It didn't blink, but when they returned to the surface and reviewed the footage, there was nothing there, not even the chamber, like it never existed. They went back down 2 days later. The entire interior had shifted. These wrecks, they're not all haunted in the traditional sense. Some feel like wounds in the ocean, torn open, infected, and never allowed to heal. One diver compared it to walking through a house that remembers everyone who died in it, except the house isn't on land. It's rotting on the seafloor, and the memories don't stay still. They drift. They find you. They climb aboard your mind like barnacles on steel. The stories aren't just about ghosts. Sometimes it's a feeling, a presence. Sometimes it's something you see after the dive, reflections in windows that shouldn't be there, a knock on the door when no one's home, salt water dripping from your ceiling in the middle of the night. And sometimes it's a dream, a loud one, a clear one, like the man who dreamed he was trapped in a flooding hallway for 7 nights straight, until he woke up and found his bed soaked, the sheets smelling like seawater. He had never been diving, never even seen the ocean, but his brother had. You can call them coincidences. You can call them hallucinations. But there are too many stories, too many signs, and too many names that were never recorded on crew lists. Sunken ships don't always stay dead, and sometimes neither does what was on board. I got an email from a woman in Maine 2 years ago. She said she'd watched one of my older videos about ghost ships and felt compelled to write. Her father had been a marine salvage diver in the 1980s. Quiet man, not spiritual, not the type to talk about things he couldn't touch or fix. But near the end of his life, he changed. She told me he stopped sleeping near open windows. He refused to bathe after dark. And on his last night, he whispered something before he passed. The girl in the porthole. It haunted her. So she went back through his old journals, kept in a metal trunk he'd sealed shut with rusted wire. Most of it was technical, depth logs, equipment lists, dive dates. But one entry stood out. It was smeared with water damage, as if it had been dunked and dried in the sun. It read, August 14th, 1987, Southeast Wreck. She's still looking through the glass. I thought it was a trick of the light, but the second time she blinked, that entry was written 3 days before he blacked out underwater and had to be pulled to the surface. He never dove again. I keep a collection of what I call echo recordings. These are sound files sent to me by divers, sonar techs, and underwater drone operators. Most are normal, bubbles, static, propeller hum. But a few, I can't explain. One in particular was recorded beneath the wreck of a passenger ferry off the Baltic Sea. The diver reported hearing music, but not through his ears, through his suit, like it was being piped in from inside the helmet. The recording picks up something faint, a woman's voice humming, slow and deliberate, almost like a lullaby, and underneath that, a creaking, rhythmic, like someone rocking in a wooden chair. That ferry had no record of musicians on board, but it did have one passenger unaccounted for, a pregnant woman traveling alone, whose name never made it to the final manifest. There are patterns you notice once you collect enough of these stories. Some divers lose time, some lose their memories, and some gain things they can't get rid of, like Jack. Jack was a former oil rig worker turned freelance wreck diver. He sent me a series of messages a year before he disappeared. At first, it was basic stuff, photos, sonar scans, coordinates. But then the messages started changing. He began sending voice notes. In the first few, he was clearly excited, then disturbed. By the final recording, he was whispering. He said his reflection had started behaving differently, that it blinked when he didn't, smiled when he looked away, that was wearing his old dive suit, the one he lost during a salvage job in the Gulf. He vanished shortly after. The police found no signs of foul play, but they did find a note scratched into his bathroom mirror. I'm not sure which one of us got out. There's a ship off the coast of Sicily, known only to local fishermen. They call it La Nave Nera, the Black Ship. It's not on any map, but older men whisper about it, especially those who've lost sons to the sea. They say if you fish too close, you'll start seeing faces in the foam. You'll catch things you didn't bait for, gloves, baby shoes, wet photographs that weren't there before. One man said he reeled in a necklace that had his wife's initials on it. She had never left the village. They say La Nave Nera moves, that it disappears for years, then shows up off another coast, dragging behind it an unnatural stillness. No wind, no waves, just silence, and fog that doesn't lift. But you don't have to go diving to be part of this story. That's what scares me the most. There's a theory I've come across again and again, whispered in forums, posted in deleted Reddit threads, hinted at in dive manuals that go out of print quickly. The idea is this: some sunken ships aren't resting. They're reaching, the same way an old radio can catch signals from the past. Some people think the wrecks are sending out signals of their own, calls for help, warnings, or worse, invitations. They reach through salt water and into electronics, into dreams, into the minds of those who dwell too long on them. Maybe that's why so many people report similar things after watching footage of these places. Hallucinations, headaches, loss of time, phantom footsteps. Maybe it's not imagination. Maybe it's a connection. There's one more thing. Someone mailed me an SD card. No return address. Just a clear plastic case and the words, "Do not watch at night," scribbled in faded ink. Curiosity 1. The footage was grainy, recorded on a helmet cam. The diver was inside a narrow passage of what looked like an old warship. As he turned a corner, the light caught a series of handprints on the wall, blackened, like they were burned into the metal. Then the camera panned down and there was a shoe, a small one, children's size. The diver didn't speak for a long time, just breathing. Then suddenly he whispered, "There's no exit." The video ended 40 seconds later. I tried to contact the sender. The email bounced. The address was fake. But my phone camera started glitching for a full week afterward. Photos taken during the day came out black. And once, I recorded a video and heard something breathing on the playback. I was alone. Wrecks. Hulls. Steel tombs lost to the sea. Most people think they're quiet down there. But if you listen closely, they're not. I once spoke to a maritime historian in Norway. He'd spent decades studying ghost ships, lost crews, unexplained disappearances. Everything from the Mary Celeste to obscure Cold War wrecks buried under layers of silence. When I asked what story scared him most, he didn't name a ship. He just said, "The ones that leave no trace." And then he added, "They're not silent. You just haven't listened long enough." That stayed with me, especially after I received a voice message from a former Coast Guard technician who had monitored distress signals in the North Atlantic for 20 years. In the last 2 years of his post, he said they began getting shortwave pings from ships never registered. Some sounded like SOS bursts. Some played snippets of old music, like recordings from wax cylinders. Some just had a single word on repeat. Below. They traced one signal to an empty stretch of ocean where nothing had ever sunk. No records, no wrecks, just cold water and static. They stopped investigating after a diver from a nearby research station went missing. His last logged words were, "I can see lights where there shouldn't be any." The ocean doesn't give back what it takes. At least not whole. A girl in Nova Scotia once mailed me a photograph. It showed her grandfather in 1961, standing aboard a steel fishing vessel with 6 other men. The strange thing? The ship they were standing on doesn't match the records of the boat he captained. The hull was painted black, not white. And in the upper left corner of the photo, a figure was peering out from one of the portholes. No one else in the family remembered being there that day. But when the photo was analyzed, it was dated 2 years after the boat was confirmed to have sunk during a storm. With all hands, no survivors, no debris recovered, just that photo. Not all stories are grand or dramatic. Some are quiet, subtle. A young couple who snorkeled off the coast of Malta swore they saw the mast of a sunken ship they'd never read about. They dove deeper and found themselves swimming through open cargo holds filled with rotten dolls, thousands of them, glassy eyes and cracked porcelain mouths. When they returned the next morning with a GoPro, the wreck was gone. They scoured the entire reef system. Nothing, even their dive tracker, didn't record the location. But every night since, they've heard a clinking in their kitchen drawers, like tiny ceramic fingers tapping on silverware. People assume that to be haunted, something terrible must have happened. But that's not always true. Some wrecks carry no tragedy, no confirmed loss, just a feeling. A weight pressing against your chest before you go under, or a silence that isn't peaceful, it's watchful, like the wreck of the Artemis Gray. She didn't sink in a storm. She didn't explode. She just vanished. And when she was found 5 years later, she was intact. Every door shut, every bunk made, lifeboat still in place. No blood, no bodies, no damage. But there was one thing. Every mirror on the ship was shattered, from the engine room to the captain's quarters, as if something had moved through them and didn't want to be seen. I've learned that water doesn't just erase. Sometimes it stores, like a cursed VHS tape, The ocean holds frames of terror, of grief, of things we can't explain. And sometimes, just sometimes, we hit play. Divers see it first. Historians feel it second. And storytellers, people like me, try to warn others before they dive too deep. But it doesn't matter, because the sea doesn't just want explorers. It wants witnesses. That's why I keep hearing from people who've never even been near the ocean. Viewers like you, ones who wake up drenched, who hear knocking under their floorboards, who find sand in their shoes weeks after vacation ended. It always starts small, and it always gets louder. So maybe it's true what they say. Not everything drowned in the ocean is gone. Some of it is still reaching. Some of it remembers the light. And some of it is waiting for someone to listen. If you watch this far, be careful. Not just of what's beneath the waves, but what might already be rising up from them.